Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your patience. This is the January meeting of the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and we are glad you're here safely. We're still waiting on a few people, but we're going to continue on, and we'll probably have to be pretty flexible with the agenda. So as we go along. But let's begin by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, most of you have your agendas in front of you, and as I said, we'll have to be flexible with these, but we will go ahead and review and approve the agenda. We have agenda item 9. The tap-in event people are not able to make it today, so we're going to strike that from the agenda. Are there any other changes to the agenda that we have? Director Wells.
I move approval of the agenda as amended.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Gallagher, that we approve the agenda as amended. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. You received the minutes from the November 14th and 15th, 2018 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll move we accept the minutes as presented.
It's been moved by Director Anderson, seconded by Director Wells, that we approve the minutes as printed from the November 14th and 15th, 2018 board meeting. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have the consent agenda in front of you. Are there any changes to that? Director Trick?
Yes, I would like to remove, I believe it is B from the consent agenda. Let me double check.
3B?
Yeah, Connell Development for further discussion.
Okay. Are there any other changes or suggestions? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve this consent agenda with the removal of agenda item 3B. Director Wells. Is there a second? It was moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Anderson, that we approve this consent agenda with the removal of agenda item 3B for further discussion. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. As you can see on your agenda, we have our meeting dates, and we don't have all the locations, but we do have which basin they're going to occur in. So that's just for your information. And then we will begin with the directors' reports of those directors that are here. So DNR, Amy.
All right. Good morning, Amy Moyer, Assistant Director for Water with DNR. I will be sitting in just today on behalf of Director Gibbs. He's very much looking forward to being here tomorrow. This meeting overlaps with an Oil and Gas Conservation Commission hearing that's also today and tomorrow, so he'll be splitting his time between the two. And I know he'd love to introduce himself in person tomorrow, so if there's time, I have just a few DNR updates I can provide today, and I suggest that we add just a couple minutes of time to tomorrow's agenda for Director Gibbs to introduce himself. Great. Great. So we're excited to work with Director Gibbs. He's most recently a Summit County Commissioner and previously served in both the Colorado legislature in both the House and the Senate. He's got some great natural resource experience, and we're looking forward to working with him, and he's looking forward to joining you all here tomorrow. I do have just some brief updates on staffing at DNR. Our budget and the legislative session is in full swing. So for staffing, 2 updates at the division level. At the division director level, Bob Broscheid has left his position as the director of Colorado Parks and Wildlife. He's returning to Arizona to be the director of their state parks. So we certainly wish him well. Jeff Versteeg, who is the director of policy and planning, will be the acting director as the process is set up to hire a new director for CPW. Also, Jeff Robbins is taking over as acting COGCC director while Julie Murphy is out on maternity leave. Jeff is an attorney out of Durango, and he brings a lot of great oil and gas experience, and so we're also happy to have him join the team. Moving into just some legislative updates, we continue to work with the Joint Budget Committee on the governor's proposal to transfer $30 million for water. Governor Polis released his first budget proposal January 15th, and you may have seen in his budget letter that he continued the support for allocating $30 million of general fund to water. His budget also acknowledged the importance of finding a bipartisan, sustainable funding source for water, and we look forward to continuing to work with him on that. In addition, the governor certainly emphasized the importance of water and building on the momentum of Colorado's water plan. For the legislative agenda, legislative session is in full swing. Just a few bills to highlight on DNR's legislative agenda for you all. So we're working on a fines and penalties bill for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. You may remember that last session, the Future Generations Act was passed, which increased fees for a variety of CPW licenses, passes, and permits. So this bill this year would update the fines and penalties. Some of the new fees now exceed the fines and penalties associated with it. So a good example is non-resident annual fishing license costs $95 now, and the penalty for not purchasing one is $50. So we're going to remove some of the disincentives there and clean up that piece of statute. We're also still working on the interim water committee bill related to severance tax, and specifically making just some technical changes to how we distribute severance tax in the operational account. So 2 main changes there. We're increasing the reserve for the natural resources grant programs from 15% to 100%, so that if we do have great severance tax years, we're better prepared for the bust cycle in those revenue streams. It also will disperse funds in arrears, as previously we would disperse funds as sort of a spend-as-you-go model based on forecasts. And so this will provide a little bit more certainty into the actual dollars that will be coming from those revenue streams. We're also working on a bill that would allow all DNR divisions to accept gift grants and donations. Currently, there was some ambiguity as to whether all divisions were able to accept grants and donations. I think this is specifically aimed to help the Colorado State Land Board and the Colorado Avalanche Center. CWCB already has that authority, but we're working on that. And then we're also preparing our 2 annual bills. So our annual projects bill that you all are very aware of, and the Species Conservation Trust Fund eligibility list that I think you'll hear a little bit more about today. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Amy. Are there any questions for Amy? Okay, we'll continue to move on. I just want to take a minute, though. Welcome Director Mitchell. She made it through the traffic, as a lot of you did. So thank you for your persistence. And we're glad that you're here safely. And also, I just wanted to take a minute to welcome the new people sitting around the table. I should have done that earlier. And as we go, I'm sure we'll continue to welcome you. But as always, we want you to feel welcome, and we've always tried to work together and listen to each other and be, an agency that collaborates and has an open mind on a lot of different things. So we're looking forward to the new members of our group here. And so we're just thankful that you're willing to do the work that you are for the state of Colorado. So thank you. So we'll go ahead and continue on. We don't have an IBCC director report or an agriculture commissioner report. So we're on to the CWCB director, Director Mitchell.
Thank you. And I apologize for my tardiness. It was the longest drive I've ever had in the city and county of Denver. In terms of where we're at, these are exciting times. So I do want to welcome Amy Beatty, who's actually in the room, but tomorrow later on today, we'll see Kate Greenberg and Dan Gibbs. I have had a chance to meet with Dan on a few occasions. I think you all are going to be very excited, and he brings a lot of new ideas and old ideas, and he is very well respected in the community. And when he gets here, he can tell you more about his background. When I say exciting times, I also mean the Colorado River. There's a lot happening on the Colorado River, and we're anxiously waiting for Arizona. We'll see that we strategically place the Colorado River and the demand management and the DCP update on tomorrow. At the end of the day, part of that is to give Arizona as much time as we need and as much time as they need. So some of what's happening in the agency in terms of how we're implementing Colorado's water plan, one of the first things is Colorado's water loss initiative. You all recall when the water plan was created that conservation was supposed to be the first part of the conversation. And so I really believe that we're taking that to heart at the CWCB. Kevin Reedy has really been leading that charge, and his water loss initiative will culminate in a 2-year training and technical assistance water loss control program. So Kevin's already convened a small advisory group to weigh in on the scope of work and to assist with the development of the programming. Approximately 82 water providers have signed up so far for training that will begin in spring of 2019. That's huge. When we talk about, we have about 100 covered entities, 82 already signing up for the training is a big deal. So the first round of the 6 workshops have been scheduled for April 5th at different locations across the state. Also, we have some other big news in terms of weather modification. There were no cameos on the news, but there was some information about some of the work that we've done across the state and in Director Trick's Basin specifically. But on January 3rd, I signed and approved the first commercial wintertime aerial cloud seeding project, and that will take place in the Never Summer Mountain Range in Jackson County. So you might have saw us, was it on 9 News, Andrew? Not us, because we don't like to take credit, but the folks in the North Platte were cameoed and talked about the importance of that. So this is a partnership with Jackson County Water Conservancy District, North Platte Basin Roundtable, also the State of Wyoming Water Development Office, and the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. So this is a new way of looking at weather mod, and the permittee will use a 2-engine turboprop King Air C-90 aircraft to drop 12 flares containing silver iodide. So hopefully we'll get some winter storms, and looks like it's already bringing them. So you'll hear a little more on some other sections. Also, you'll hear a little more about CWCB staff continuing to aid in the fire-affected communities and recovery activities. One of the first agenda items is some of the work that we're doing, but the summer of 2018 really represented the worst wildfire year in Colorado in quite some time. And you all remember where the 3 most damaging fires were, and they included the 416 fire in La Plata, Spring Fire in Huerfano and Castillo counties, and the Lake Christine fire in Eagle County. So the area was diverse and spread across the areas of the state, and staff has taken this as one of their passions and made sure that we're focused on doing what we can and working within our program's constraints and guidelines to help any areas that have been affected. One of the things that we can do is that often we use our programs to look at ways as they're rebuilding to make things better. And that's exactly what we're doing with our Watershed Health Program. So you might have also heard in terms of the federal shutdown, we have a little bit of a reprieve, but we are still concerned. But I wanted the board to know and the people to know some of the effect of that federal shutdown and what that had on the programs across the state. So that shutdown began right before Christmas on December 22nd, 2018. And it really left several federal natural resources agencies unfunded. We work with our federal partners pretty well. And so when they are unfunded, some of our programs become unfunded. And unfortunately, some of our really important programs were unfunded. So we look at this 3-week break or reprieve and say, let's make some, let's hope that we can keep all these agencies funded. So one of the programs that have been affected were the San Juan recovery programs. So all coordination efforts for that program had been halted during that shutdown. So both the acting and assistant program coordinator staff were on furlough. So we couldn't communicate. We couldn't do any of those things. So when work halts, on the federal side, oftentimes we either have to pick up the pace on our side or halt our work also. The Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Program had multiple personnel working full-time that were exempt from the current furlough, but so there was still work that was able to happen on that. The Platte River Recovery Program experienced minimal effects, but which has received the appropriations for 2019. So just wanted to keep you updated on that. I also wanted to give an update. So you might have noticed that John Stolp isn't here, and so he has moved on. So we are determining on how we're going to look at the IBCC director, and there'll be some probably news on that in the coming weeks, but that doesn't mean we're stopping work. We are going to continue to work. We're going to do our jobs the way that we always do. The next IBCC board meeting is February 28th. On the tentative agenda as of now, the agenda's not finalized, but we're really looking at the IBCC work plan and what's happening and how we move forward. There'll be some discussion on long-term funding and the work from Keystone and Walton Group. There'll be a report out from the implementation working group, and then we'll be talking about the Basin implementation plans and how we're going to move forward with those. We'll also be talking about the statewide summit, which is scheduled now September 25th, 26th. The IBCC, of course, is very interested in the Colorado River, and they'll want to hear about the DCP planning efforts and what's happening. And then some of the big things are updating looking at the water plan and the goals and where we're at, and SWASI and the long-range plan towards the future. So that's the IBCC report. I know I'm no John Stolp, but there you go. He would have prophesized. He would have prophesized on things a little more. But we do have some changes in the agency also I wanted to make folks aware of. Heinz, who I'm going to try not to cry. This is his last board meeting. Now, Heinz isn't really with the CWCB. You may or may not know that. He's actually with OIT. And so, but we have claimed him as our own and have used him like our own. And so I don't know a time that Heinz hasn't been around. So this is going to be a hard one for me. And he's leaving, I think it's Valentine's Day. February 12th. I thought I knew it was right around there, but so he will be sorely missed. We also have a pretty big news in terms of some structural changes within the agency. And as we looked at implementing Colorado's water plan and the long range funding, and if we were to get additional funding in the agency, how we would need to kind of shift and rework on the staff level. And so one of the things that we thought about, and it's been a year in the making, is looking at a chief operating officer that will really focus on the long range financial goals of the agency, not just funding projects or financing projects, but really looking at the agency and making sure that all of our funding is going to implement Colorado's water plan and meet those goals as quickly as we possibly can. So we posted a chief operating officer position and went through the process, and I'm really happy to say that Anna Moss actually is the one that will now be our chief operating officer. And I've worked with Anna for I think a decade now, and she is more than qualified for this. So these are very exciting times. Also in other you might also guess that she's pretty well loved in the agency, and people are very confident in this decision. Also, you might recall that the last board meeting, I threatened our state engineer, and that came true. And we did steal Colin Watson as a new team member for the in-stream flow section. So we will always get the cream of the crop, and wherever they are. And and the benefit of being in CWCB is that we get to work with others and see their gifts and determine how they will fit into our roles. And that's what we did in this case. And so we're very happy to have Colin. I don't know if he is here at this point, but when he'll be here tomorrow, so I'll make sure to publicly shame him again tomorrow. So, but make sure you get a chance to say hi, and my condolences, Kevin. I apologize. And that is it for me.
All right. Thank you, Director Mitchell. Are there any questions for Director Mitchell? All right. Well, I just want to say thanks to Heinz for all your hard work for us. We're going to miss you tremendously. So just wanted to give you a big hearty round of applause and a thank you. And wish you well in your next chapter. All right, we'll continue on, and we have the State Engineer, Director Ryan.
Thank you, Director Young. And I thought I was going to have a chance to go before Director Mitchell today, and maybe my report would sound a little more exciting because she's always got so much going on. And I just missed that opportunity. And I'll open with thanking you, Director Mitchell, again for hiring Colin. It's always nice to place one of our employees inside your agency for a while, and we get to know what's going on. So thank you for that. A couple of my updates. The Republican River Basin, pardon my voice. We did, as I've been telling you about for several meetings, we did have a chance to file our rules with the Water Court for compact administration in the Republican River Basin. We did that January 11th. And I know that for the last 2 or 3 meetings, I've been telling you we're about to or we're going to. And the delay is not just procrastination. The delay has been, and I don't even want to call it a delay, but it's been a very contemplative process with stakeholders. We've found over the last year or so there's been value in just one more stakeholder meeting or one more chance to look at the rules and make sure that the way they treat the water users is fair and equitable. We want rules that go to the Water Court with all that attention to fairness to the water users in the basin, and gives us the security and the certainty at the state engineer's office that we really can administer according to these rules and stay in compliance with our compact. So that's been a little bit of the time spent. nonetheless, they did need to be filed soon, and we did that on January 11th, as I said. An effort concurrent with that, and I believe I got to touch on this in the last meeting, is the legislation, House Bill 1029, I believe it is, for the Republican River Basin, and this is the bill that changes the district boundary for the Republican River Water Conservation District, aligns that boundary with what's known as the model domain, which is something more of a hydrogeological boundary in terms of wells that actually impact our compact. This has been a discrepancy that has loomed out there or been problematic out there for some time. And it affects, again, that equitability and fairness question in terms of the way the water users in the basin see it. That bill, as I've told you before, was brought forth by the Interim Water Resources Review Committee last summer. It now has gotten through the House, and we look forward to it going to the Senate. This is a bill of the districts, but we certainly see the value of it primarily because it complements our rulemaking and gives the water users in the basin a way to comply with the rules. So there are fair concerns by water users in the basin, and I think we've worked with the district to try to address those concerns, and it's on a good path. Couple items in the Arkansas River Basin. Again, I've advised you in the past that we're working on getting a permanent agreement for the permanent pool in John Martin Reservoir. It's something that's been very important to Parks and Wildlife. We've worked with Brett Ackerman, and that's something that we will likely see come to fruition. Director Goebel, I think, come to fruition here in the next month or two, getting that resolution for a permanent pool, a permanent agreement for the permanent pool. Another item in the Arkansas, I'm just going to mention it. We've talked for the last year about Kucharis number 5, the removal of the dam. I'm not going to say any more about it. We have Scott Cuthbertson here today and this afternoon on your agenda. Scott Cuthbertson is Deputy State Engineer over, among other things, dam safety. He's going to update you this afternoon on that matter, so I won't say anything more about it now. On another note, I'm going to mention, as we all know, Colorado Water Congress, the winter conference convenes beginning Wednesday. Just a personal plug for the early morning workshop. We've got about 3 hours with our division engineers. In the past, the division engineers have gone around the state, each of them doing about a half-hour presentation on their division. It's always been well attended, very interesting. We're going to do it a little bit differently this year, and the division engineers are going to be all up there at one time and talk on different topics, and we'll have sort of a panel discussion with all of them up there at one time. So where it's been good in the past, I think it's going to be even better Wednesday morning, and we'll round that out with a little discussion from Denver office leadership, those of us that are in the Denver office. So I'd encourage you to to come to that. Really apologize about my voice. Last thing I want to mention is that last Friday morning, which was 2 or 3 days ago, I got to travel to Montrose to speak at a water workshop that was put on by the National Young Farmers Coalition. Coincidentally, I made the connection for the sponsor of that workshop, the National Young Farmers Coalition, with a person I met in Mancos doing a discussion on water rights for Kawa about a year ago. And I met this person that asked me to come speak at that Western Water Workshop, which was last Friday. That person, by the way, was Kate Greenberg, our new Commissioner of Agriculture that is not here yet, but I believe will be joining us later. In any event, as I arrived in town in Montrose Thursday evening, I coincidentally ran into Frank Kugel, the manager of the Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District. He and I just ended up at the same steakhouse at the same time, had a nice conversation with him. And he told me he had seen Directors Dutton and Hawkins at an educational event the day before in Nucla a part of our state where many don't venture too often. And it sounded like a very interesting educational opportunity. So we had 2 of those back to back. And it made me think, as I was driving home Friday evening, that we're really lucky in Colorado, and I don't know if there's another state that could compare to us in the way that we have so many interests that have the objective of educating Colorado water users on the way water works, and not just on the simple things, but the very often difficult and nuanced things like water administration and water rights and compacts and water courts and so on. And I got to thinking, and it's always risky to start naming names because you forget someone, but I think of Water Education Colorado, our major universities, the Colorado Bar, the Water Court Education Committee, different water providers, agricultural interests like CAWA and Cattlemen's and the Farm Bureau, Water Congress, our own DNR agencies, and a long list. And these are not people just with pamphlets, but people that go and meet and talk and have a major objective of educating our water users. And everybody in Colorado is a water user, as we know, but educating everybody on these nuances of the way water works in Colorado. And I wanted to recognize what a nice situation we're in Colorado. Admirable, I think, to other states that we do this. So I think that's important to bring out. And that's all I have for today, Director Yon.
All right, thanks, Director Ryan. Are there any questions for Director Ryan? I just had one. Concerning the Republican River boundaries legislation, was there any, I know there are some wells that augment to the South Platte Basin that are now going to be included in these boundaries. Was there any resolution to that in the language of the bill, any amendments or anything like that?
Thank you, Director Yon. I believe there's resolution to the issue, but not in the bill. And if I can take a minute to address that, the difficulty that we found in our rulemaking is that we don't have a good legal basis for carving out water users that are hydrogeologically in the model domain, but there's a fairness issue that we all may feel they should not be subjected to the rules. And at the very same time, I think the district, and through that legislation, they face the same conflict, that there's not a good basis for what would appear to be an arbitrary carving out of those water users. So the solution must lie somewhere else. And I believe that the district has, as they wanted to, taken up that solution, and they have an agreement. Let me be very careful with my language because it's between the district and these well owners. But I believe an agreement is on the table that's workable for both sides, that those water users that were considered in the South Platte Basin, and of course, hydrologically on the surface they are, but those water users are able to, through individual memorandums of agreement, continue in their South Platte plan and not have to pay into the district to participate in the district's plan. So it solves the problem for everyone. Our rules would apply to them. They need to be in a plan. By virtue of being in the district, they will be in a plan. The district responds to them by not requiring payment to be in the plan. And we believe that everybody comes out a winner, so to speak, through that.
All right, thanks for that explanation. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on. Thanks, Director Ryan. Colorado Division of Parks and Wildlife, Jackie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Corday, head of the Water Resources section for CPW. And as Amy mentioned, Director Broscheid's last day was the 23rd, and Jeff Versteeg is sitting in for him now. That was just announced by Dan Gibbs on Friday. So we just got that news that he'll be the interim. This is the first meeting that Katie Birch is taking over for Jay Skinner. So I guess 20 some odd years of Jay Skinner being here. And now Katie, would you stand up? I just want to make sure everybody knows you. Katie Birch is taking over for in-stream flow. Yay, Katie. We also have some transition coming up with our State Parks Water Resources Engineer. Bachman Hatami has been serving parks. Before that, he was at CWCB. He's going to be retiring in June, at the end of June, and so his job was just posted last week. It'll be our second PE2 Water Resources Engineer that we'll hire. The first one was Carlin Armstrong, who some of you might have met. She takes care of all of the mitigation for federal water projects. I just wanted to mention again, one of the big projects that we've been taking on over this winter is prioritizing low flow reaches, having all of our aquatic biologists across the state look at what reaches of streams are kind of chronically low flow, whether that's due to drought or just because of the situation with the water rights and the way that the water comes off the river. And they're looking at it from the perspective of fish and what would be their highest priority if they could keep that flow going during the low flow of the summer. What would be their priority? And Katie has been meeting with all of our aquatic biologists to start gathering all that information. That's called phase 1 of this project. Phase 2 is we will start analyzing our own water rights. As you know, CPW has a significant amount of water rights, and we will analyze our own to see if there are opportunities to keep the river flowing. Phase 3 is we will reach out to partners and start looking at opportunities to work with partners. Certainly as CWCB, others like Colorado Water Trust will be looking to them to look for opportunities. So that's something that I'm excited about, is being proactive in planning. At this year's in-stream flow workshop, which is happening on Wednesday at Water Congress, Katie will be presenting 8 reaches in Division 6 and 1 reach in Division 4. And then there will also be an update on upcoming data collection efforts on about 10 reaches that were previously nominated by CPW at the 2017 and 2018 workshops. And then kind of going along in Kevin's vein, a lot of us sounds like we've been working on educating folks on different things that are important. And last week, our water section had a big lift on attending the annual aquatics 2-day meeting. CPW biologists from all over the state and aquatic researchers come together for a 2-day workshop. This year it was in Salida. And this was the first time the Water Resources section gave 2.5 hours of presentations to the biologists. And the first presentation was on spill response, how to respond when, unfortunately, there's usually an accident on the highway and a tanker crashes and water, either gas or something like that will get into a stream. And so the training was how to respond to that. It's very involved protocols to keep the biologists safe because sometimes it's a hazardous situation. So we went through that training. Then we, for the first time, did what's called SB40 Stream Protection Certification. And I don't know if many of you have heard about SB40. It was passed in 1969. And the purpose of it was that CPW would get to review plans for construction projects that are potentially going to impact streams. So the most typical situation is when CDOT has a road construction project, and that's going to potentially alter the bed of the stream or alter the banks. And so this training was to help our aquatic biologists understand what's our role, what's CPW's role in that. And we get to look at the plans and review the plans and make recommendations on how to lessen the impact to the aquatic environment. So that was really a good thing for our biologists to understand what that role is. And mainly it's a lot about trying to keep erosion from happening. And then if it does happen, keeping the sediment out of the streams. Because sedimentation to our streams, that's a real problem for aquatic life. Another segment of the training was Katie talked about our in-stream flow program. So our biologists will understand that. And then Carlin Armstrong, our senior engineer, gave a presentation on mitigation and what CPW's role is in that for federal water projects. And that's it for my report.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Are there any questions for Jackie? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. We have Mike Brode with the Colorado Water Resource and Power Development Authority. Welcome, Mike.
There we go. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board member. Showing green. Is it on now? There we go. I'll start over. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, Director Mitchell. My name is Mike Brode. I'm with the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. As you know, this time of year, every year, we have a joint resolution process. It's actually passed the House now. So we got a good early start on that. But that joint resolution contains changes and modifications to our 2 state revolving project eligibility lists. And that's an extensive process. The Water Quality Control Division does a great job of a survey every spring of systems out there. And just a reminder, this is on top of those projects or funding that's required under the water plan. This is on top of that. So this year, on the wastewater side, we've identified 283 projects for a need of $8.9 billion. And on the drinking water side, there's 350 projects identified for a need of $9 billion. So you can throw on another $20 billion basically to the water plan. But we'll continue that process. It's off to the Senate now. So again, I do appreciate our sponsors that are carrying that forward. Do want to talk about the Animas La Plata project. I know Kirk Russell, I'm sure, has briefed you guys on the final cost allocations that the Bureau has finally come up with for us, and we do appreciate that. We want to get that resolved. Our part of the ALP depletion allocation is 2,600 acre feet of depletion. The final cost is approximately $402,000. So I've been working with the city of Durango, the Animas La Plata Water Conservancy District to figure out, we have not yet met with the Bureau, but I think I've got some things to discuss with my board at our board meeting in this room Wednesday at 2 o'clock if you want to join us. I need to talk to them about what our, how we go forward, how we move forward with our discussions with the Bureau. But I think we're all looking forward to just moving forward and operating the project. I know there's still some punch list items that the association is working out with the Bureau, particularly the Overmeyer gates on the intake structure. That's been a sore spot for quite a long time. And then also I wanted to mention that although they were appointed, well, actually Bob Wolf from Durango was reappointed from that area of the state, and Chris Treese was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper. I got a new executive order just last week that from Governor Polis that reappointed Bob Wolf and appointed Chris Treese. So we'll be working to get those two confirmed here soon. I'll have to set up a confirmation hearing with the Senate Ag Committee. So I think with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Any questions for Mike this morning? All right. Thank you very much. We'll continue on with agenda item 6. And we have Chris Sturm, who made it with us safely. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning, Chris Sturm, CWCB staff, the Watershed and Flood Protection Section. Glad I made it this morning. I'm feeling a little guilty about all the people that I left out there on the road, but maybe I could police them up on the way back. This morning we're going to be talking about the Watershed Restoration Program grant funding recommendations. The board may recall that you made the decision, I believe in 2015, the last time we changed the guidance for this program, to just consider applications over $100,000 that requested over $100,000. So today we have 12 applications. The total request is $2,960,300. And Director Mitchell's report to the board are the other 17 applications that were for under 100,000 total. And the total amount for those were 769,688. So the total funding request for the program this year was just north of 3.7 million. And that's the recommended funding amount as well. So this is probably the largest funding recommendation that this program has seen since its inception in 2008. Today we're looking at the funding recommendations for applications in Table 1. I have them on the screen here, but it's difficult to see, so hopefully you have them in front of you. I also have them shown on a map here in green. Those are the watersheds in which the applications originated. There's 7 applications in the watershed and flood restoration mitigation category. That also includes monitoring, and 5 applications in the stream management planning category. We do have some folks in the audience with us. I'm very impressed that they made it. They're very dedicated people. Jessica Olson with the Left-Hand Watershed Oversight Group is here. Chelsea Nutter with the Upper Arkansas Water Conservancy District. And John Galusha and Sandy White are here representing Huerfano County and the Huerfano County Water Conservancy District. If I missed anybody else, will you please stand up? Got them all. There were a lot of other folks that really wanted to be here. I got a litany of emails and texts this morning. I think for obvious reasons, we know why they're not here, and we certainly want everybody to be safe. So this round, you're looking at applications in front of you that look at a variety of different things that are fundable through the program. We're looking at continued restoration, adaptive management, and monitoring of areas affected by the 2013 floods. We spent tens of millions of dollars in those areas. We're certainly interested in continued efforts there. We have some new restoration projects here that are coupled with economic redevelopment projects, and really look forward to seeing how those progress. Some invasive removal projects, as well as some projects in the realm of post-fire recovery, pre-flood protection and mitigation, as well as early warning systems. And those are associated with the Spring Creek fire, the 416 fire, and the Hayden Pass fire. Again, the funding recommendation is that staff recommends that the board approve a non-reimbursable expenditure of up to $2,960,300 from the Colorado Watershed Restoration Program for the purpose of providing match funding to the projects identified in Table 1. And I can answer any specific questions about those projects if you have them.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Director Wells.
I'm just curious, is there a reason why we adopt them all in one motion? Unlike other grants?
We brought them this way in front of the board last year, and you guys adopted them that way last year, and I asked if you wanted to continue doing it that way. I got the head nod yes, but we could certainly consider doing it another way for next year. It's certainly the board's pleasure as to how I present them.
Can I say something? And I do want to remind the board that we had mentioned and had discussion of some of these projects at the last board meeting.
All right. Any other questions for Chris? Director Goebel.
I guess thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to thank Chris and all the other staff members that put in a lot of extra time and effort on these projects, particularly for the communities affected by the wildfires, to help get the funding and support they need to begin their recovery efforts and or continue the recovery efforts. And you guys have gone above and beyond, so I appreciate that.
Director Mitchell.
Chris, could you mention a little bit about the process so that folks are aware of the rigorous effort that went into
Certainly,
reviewing
yes.
these applications?
So the applications, the stream management plan applications were reviewed by 7 people, and including someone from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Katie Birch, who's out here. The other applications were reviewed by 5 people. I did some quick math based on how long it took me and talking to them, and I'm thinking that there was a total of about 4 weeks of staff time invested in reviewing these applications. We take them very seriously. We get together and have a meeting and discuss the relative scores, the averages, the geography, the importance as to whether or not we're protecting lives from flooding. This was a very unique year in that most every application we got, all but one, scored very well, and we discussed that they should be recommended for funding. That's not to say that staff won't be making some suggestions on how to improve these scopes of work. So our time hasn't ended. The grants for under 100,000 that have been approved at staff level, we're already discussing those applications with the applicants. And depending on the decision here today, we'll be working with every one of these applicants as well on ways to fine tune and improve their efforts, as well as provide our technical assistance and our experience so that we can help them along, especially through some of the lessons that we've learned in disaster recovery.
Director Hawkins.
Thanks. I want to echo Director Goebel's comments, especially around the La Plata County application that has to do with the aftermath of the 416 fire. I know Director Mitchell and you, Chris, have been working really hard, and just so the board knows, there are some serious life and property concerns in La Plata County underneath the burn scar. And so our participation in this project, as well as federal participation through the EWP program, and La Plata County offering to step up and to help run the process, is the way that we're going to help protect folks that live under the burn scar. So that one's a really important application coming out of my region, and I just wanted to thank you for all the time and attention to that one.
All right. Director Dutton.
I want to jump on this bandwagon and thank you, Chris, for all your work on this, and thank you and Kevin for responding to all of these communities that have been impacted by natural events, especially the fires. These guys came down and they visited the spring fire. I know that you guys go all over the state helping people out. So thank you for that, and for providing your expertise and assistance to these communities as they learn to navigate the federal assistance and the EWP program, which you're probably our state expert in now. So thank you for giving all that advice to these folks. And also thanks for all the help that you've done in getting these stream management plan grants off the ground. I know that, a lot of people have ideas, but they really need some assistance in putting the meat on the bones for the application. And I know that you do a lot of help with that. So thank you, because these are, they're really important projects that are leading to really great conversations about how can we make our streams better and how can we implement good projects and implement Colorado's water plan. So thank you for all of your efforts.
All right. Thanks, Chris, for doing all this. This is a good story. We just get to hear all these things that are happening that you're working on through this, and I appreciate your diligence in all of this. So thank you very much. And I just wanted to allow, if you don't have to, but anybody in the audience that's here, Jessy or Chelsea or John or Sandy, if you want to say anything, I would welcome that, but if you don't, you don't have to. Sandy?
I think you can hear me.
Would you step up to the mic, please, and just state your name and who you're with? Because there's people out in the audience.
I'm Sandy White from the Huerfano County Water Conservancy District, and I had a very brief statement to make, and that is that you can not say enough about your staff and its great work down at the location of these disasters. And not only your staff, but Director Ryan's staff has been helpful for us, and the early warning gauges, DHSCM, as well as DOLA have been very helpful. We often refer to ourselves as the orphan county, but we don't feel that way anymore. So thanks to you and thanks to your staff, particularly Chris.
All right. Thanks, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy? Jesse, would you like to? Just state your name and who you're with.
Jessy Olson, Executive Director with Left-Hand Watershed Oversight Group. And I, braved the icy roads driving an hour for a 10-minute drive or 10-mile drive. So I thought better come up here and say something. But thank you very much. Really appreciate your consideration. And we're particularly excited about this project that we have under consideration today. It really leverages some new partnerships that will help long-term sustainability of our organization. And as well, we're really excited about contributing to the state of science of river restoration in the first part of our application. So thank you for the consideration.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Any questions for Jesse? Chelsea, I see you making your way up here. State your name and who you're with, please.
Chelsea Nutter, Upper Arkansas Water Conservancy District. I completely felt pressured to come up here since everybody else did. But no, I'm glad I did because I did want to thank CWCB, the board, and the staff. Chris has been so helpful in helping these communities figure out what to do, how to find funding, how to put the pieces together. And I know the community is very thankful for all of the support that you guys have provided them as they struggle through how to cope with these fire and flood recovery efforts. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Chelsea. Any questions for Chelsea? All right. Well, we have a staff recommendation. Oh, Director Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. I do need to disclose to the board that my employer, the Nature Conservancy, is providing some cash match in the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable application. I don't see a need to have to separate the voting, but did want to disclose that to the board.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. All right. Well, we have a staff recommendation for $2,960,300 for the approval of these 12 projects. Do I hear a motion? Director Goebel.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 6.
It's been moved by Director Goebel, seconded by Director Dutton, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 6. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you. Yes, and just to comment on Director Wells' comment, if the board wants to see this done a different way next year, just please talk to Director Mitchell about it. I'm happy to do it any other way. And as I walk away here, I'm just going to toggle to another slide so you can see the geographic representation of the grants that weren't brought here for your approval, but just to see where they are real quick. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Chris. We're going to move agenda item 7 because Kevin, we're going to move it to the end of the day, I think, because Kevin can't get out of his driveway. So, so we'll move on to agenda item 8, and that's Craig and Megan on the Water Supply Reserve Fund applications. Welcome, Craig.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Let me cue this up. Again, good morning. Craig Gabu, CWCB staff with the Water Supply Planning section. These will be agenda items 8A through E. I'll be presenting agenda items 8A and B, and Megan will be presenting agenda items 8C through E. Okay. This is agenda item 8A. It is an action item and a grant request recommended for approval by the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable. The co-applicants are the Upper Yampa River Working Group and the Upper Yampa River Water Conservancy District, with the Upper Yampa River Water Conservancy District serving as the grantee for the study titled Characterization of Stream Flow, Suspended Sediment, and Nutrients in the Upper Yampa River Basin. The purpose of this application is to assist the co-applicants and the United States Geological Survey to characterize stream flow, suspended sediments, and nutrients using historic and more recently acquired water quality data. Stream flow, suspended sediment, and nutrients have been prioritized by local stakeholders because of the pending or existing regulations and to better understand the potential causes of increased prolific algae blooms in the Upper Yampa River Basin, some of which have shown to be toxic. The project objectives include attaining a better understanding of the causes of increased prolific algae occurrences in the Upper Basin watershed, applying stream flow data to the past 8 years of USGS water quality data collected at sample sites within the basin will allow the USGS to create accurate nutrient and sediment loading models. This analysis is designed to provide new data and subsequent understanding of the transport and fate of nutrients and sediments, as well as seasonal fluctuations at sites throughout the watershed. As part of this analysis, a comprehensive evaluation of potential loading sources will be undertaken. Water suppliers, wastewater treatment operators, recreational users, and the citizenry at large will benefit from this analysis. Water managers, including those in the agricultural industry, will be better able to make informed decisions as the dynamics of these important constituents are better understood. The co-applicants have identified $67,076 in matching contributions. However, written verification for all matches have yet to be provided. Therefore, staff recommends a conditional approval of this grant contingent upon the applicant providing documentation verifying all matching contributions prior to entering into a grant contract. Otherwise, no issues or no additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, I will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $77,424 from the Yampa White Green Basin account, and staff recommends approval. Unfortunately, the applicant was unable to attend today, so I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions for Craig on agenda item 8A? Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Craig, for your presentation. This request for this grant is an expansion of an ongoing program that has been going on since about 2008. We've had where the stakeholders, a number of local stakeholders, have put together money and to monitor water quality and stream characteristics of the Upper Yampa Basin. This also feeds into the City of Steamboat's ongoing stream management plan, which has to do with water quality, temperatures, and our recreational opportunities in the corridor through Steamboat Springs. So this has multiple purposes. It has many stakeholders involved and has been an ongoing program. And this, we hope that this additional information will be able to inform our stream management plan for the Steamboat 13-mile reach. I do see that Ken Brenner, who is the president of Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, is here. Do you want to say anything? Okay. Yeah, yeah, behind schedule. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Anyway, with that, Mr. Chairman, if there are no additional questions or discussion, I would move staff's recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved.
I just, for
Jackie.
CPW, wanted to make a strong statement of support for this. Our staff, our water quality staff have been very involved over the last few years and spent many, many nights in Meeker doing water sampling. And so I'm happy to hear about this and support it.
All right, thanks, Jackie. So we have a motion and we have a second. It's been moved by Director Gallagher, second by Director Goebel, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8A. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Craig. Agenda
Thank you,
item
Mr. Chair.
8B.
Yes. This is agenda item 8B. It is also an action item and is a grant request recommended for approval by the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable. The applicant and grantee is the City of Steamboat Springs for the project titled Yampa River Forest Restoration and Temperature Mitigation Project. The purpose of this application is to assist the City of Steamboat Springs and the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council's ReTree program to restore the riparian forest through strategic plantings of willows, alders, cottonwoods, and other native river plant species on public, open space parcels, and other prioritized locations. The 2018 Yampa River Health Assessment and Stream Flow Management Plan found that the riparian forest is degraded on the reach of the Yampa River above the Chuck Lewis State Wildlife Area through town and to the wastewater treatment plant, and that improving the quality of the vegetation, particularly the shading canopy cover, will lead to improvements in stream flow temperature and water quality on the Yampa River. By restoring the river forest, this 3-year project that was identified as a top priority action in the stream management plan will also help to improve aquatic and terrestrial habitat and to stabilize the river channel, thus making it more resilient to floods, droughts, or human impacts. This project will connect community members, especially youth, to the river through this locally established volunteer tree planting program. WSRF funds will be used to design and prioritize restoration projects to secure an adequate supply of trees and plants that are purchased and or harvested locally, to construct a seasonal riparian plant nursery if deemed necessary, to coordinate plantings on prioritized areas, and to protect plants by installing temporary barriers and irrigation systems were identified in the design phase. The applicant has identified $150,000 in cash matching contributions. However, written verification for these matches have yet to be provided. Therefore, staff recommends a conditional approval of this grant contingent upon the applicant providing documentation verifying the matching contributions prior to entering into a grant contract. Otherwise, no additional needs or issues have been identified. If approved, Chris Sturm will be CWCB's project manager. The applicant requests $25,000 from the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, and staff recommends a conditional approval. Thank you. The applicant was unable to make it as well.
Thank you, Craig. Are there any questions for Craig? Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Craig, for your presentation. I think you pretty well covered it. Again, this is the first recommendation for mitigation work to address some of the issues raised and discovered in the stream management plan that City Steamboat has engaged with over the past couple of years with this body's funding. The other stakeholders involved are the City of Steamboat Springs, obviously, but also their GOCO funds involved. And I believe the CWCB Stream Restoration Project has just approved their stream management appropriation for a grant for $50,000. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would, one other thing I'd like to say is that this is a real community effort. These kinds of, the community has engaged in tree planting exercises almost every year, and this brings our all sectors of our community together. So I think the educational outreach component of this is very important. to our community and for the realization of the issues facing the river going through that 13-mile reach. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend staff's recommendation. I would recommend to approve staff's recommendation.
All right. Thank you. Is there a second? It's been moved by Director Gallagher, seconded by Director Wells. Did you have something to say as well?
Yes, this is a little bit of an aside, but on the subject matter of, what does CWCB do with its money? This is a river restoration project, really, but it's not in the watershed grant thing. So I'm just wondering, when we categorize, if we could, in other words, can this get put in a column with river restoration or fire response or something? Because it really is important for people to understand. WSRA covers the gamut of things. And if we can categorize them as well as we do others, then I think maybe we will better be able to communicate how the money really is going on the ground in all these various places.
Thank you for that comment, Director Wells. And as we're updating Colorado's water plan and we look at tracking our progress on those goals, we are looking at every dollar spent and how they meet those goals. So that is the intent and effort. So in our next implementation report, we'll make sure that we put special focus towards that.
All right. Thank you, Director Wells. That's a good comment. It's been moved and seconded that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8B. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Megan's up next.
All right. I just want to take a minute. We had our new Commissioner of Agriculture just joined us, so welcome, Director Greenberg. It's good to have you here. Oh, yeah. So we're going to give you some time to settle down from your traffic experience, and maybe right before we go break for lunch, we'll give you a little bit of time to address the board. So welcome. All right, Megan, agenda item 8C.
Good morning. Megan Holcomb, CWCB staff, presenting agenda items C through D on agenda item 8. Agenda item 8, yes. 8C is a request for $10,000 from the Colorado Basin account to contribute to a large river recreation construction project at Las Colonias Park in Mesa County. The main goal of the project is to restore 1,200 feet of what was once a riparian area in the downtown Grand Junction riverfront, also while improving the overall ecosystem and fish habitat. An additional inlet channel will allow flowing water for a greater period of the year and avoid adverse impacts to existing aquatic habitat in the main channel of the Colorado River. The City of Grand Junction is matching the request with $625,000 in cash funds, and there's also a pending $350,000 request from GOCO. The applicant has existing CWCB grants. That's both a water plan grant and the watershed restoration grant totaling $249,000, and Chris Sturm will continue to serve as project manager. Staff does recommend approval. A representative was not able to make it today, so I can take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah. Are there any questions for Megan? Director Hawkins.
Thanks, Megan. I noticed reviewing the staff recommendations that we are not being consistent in whether we're conditioning the approval on having secured the funds, and I was wondering if that's something that staff is going to look at. I don't have strong feelings on it. I just feel like we should be fair across the state.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up. I noticed that as well. Are there strong feelings on the board? The reason I did not make this one conditional based on those GOCO funds is that they are basically through the process. Their board meeting is not until March, so it goes through final approval in March. So they've been conditionally approved by GOCO. If that changes anything.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Hawkins. Director George.
Thank you. To that last point, I think I remember we have general language in all of our policies about conditions that are precedent to funding. And so I think not including it doesn't mean there still wouldn't be a question asked and answered to verify funds received. Isn't that the way the process works?
Sorry, to wait until all funds set out in the budget are approved.
We wouldn't
Yes.
fund until everything else was
Yes.
clear. I think
So-
that's standard practice.
Yeah, if it's approved here and there's still a critical component in their budget that they haven't met, we would wait till contract to make sure that's all in line.
Yeah. So if there's no further questions, I would move that we accept staff recommendation to approve up to $10,000 to Las Colonias Park in Mesa County, Grand Junction.
It's been moved by Director George, seconded by Director Anderson, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8C. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Megan. Agenda item 8D.
Agenda item 8D is a request for $43,100 from the Rio Grande Basin account to support the Mosca Hooper Conservation District in initiating a pilot hydrogeology study to inform groundwater modeling in the San Luis Valley. Funds for this pilot project will be used within the unconfined aquifer system of Alamosa County as a township-scale proof-of-concept project for geophysical aquifer feature mapping with electrical resistivity technology. And in a nutshell, if I were to distill that, that is basically really cool mapping technology. This work will map depths from 5 feet to 40 feet below soil surface and it's intended to locate site-specific differences in impediments to recharge. So that information is useful for water managers to allow surface water to be routed to locations where recharge has the greatest potential. The applicant has provided a $30,265 match between 3 different partners. Staff recommends approval, and I will serve as the project manager. The applicant was not able to make it today, so happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Megan. Any questions for Megan? Director Dutton.
Megan, thank you. That was a great explanation. And if we can figure out any new ways or any new data to inform how we are doing recharge and have it be more effective, then that will help us as we're working on groundwater sustainability with the unconfined aquifer in the San Luis Valley. So it's pretty new science, but if this pilot produces good information, then it could be pretty exciting. So I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 8C. Nope, D. Yes.
It's been moved by Director Dutton, second by Director Gallagher, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8D. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Megan. Next, agenda item 8E.
8E is a request for $18,500 from both the Metro and South Platte accounts to help achieve the goals identified in the South Platte's Joint Education Action Plan. These funds will also support the efforts of the Education Committee in conjunction with the Roundtable's Environment and Rec Committees. The effort will increase engagement with the Basin Implementation Plan through public outreach and participation with the agricultural community, local conservation and conservancy districts, energy developers, as well as municipal and industrial water users and suppliers. As this is a direct roundtable effort, no matching funds are required for this grant. Staff recommendation is approval, and I will serve as the project manager. The applicant was not able to make it today, so happy to take questions.
All right. Are there any questions for Megan? Director Wells?
Well, the South Platte and the metro area is obviously vast and complicated and difficult. And any education that we can do would be a good idea. This is not much money for as big as the problem is. But I would like to move staff's recommendation on agenda item 8E.
It's been moved by Director Wells, seconded by Director Hawkins, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 8E. Is there any discussion? I just want to say we've had this water education coordinator for a while, couple years, I think.
2 years, a year and a half. Yeah.
So this is a continuation of that on the South Platte Metro roundtables, and it's been very helpful for us to be able to reach out and educate people in our area. So thank you for your consideration of this. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. All right, as we stated earlier, agenda item 9 is not going to happen because the people with the tap-in could not make it. So we will move on to agenda item 10, and that's Kevin. Here he comes. Did you ride your bike in? Did not. Okay.
Get to load up our presentation, but no, I did not ride my bike. And okay. I might have gotten fast here.
You probably would have been faster. That's right. Just glad you're here.
Yeah.
Well, let's have Kate come. While you work on that, maybe we have Kate figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that okay?
I'm making a command decision.
Are you okay with that, Kate?
Yeah, just
okay.
pull it up real quick. Well, thank you all so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Sitting at the table today as incoming Commissioner of Agriculture. I had my Senate confirmation hearing on Thursday, so it's almost official, even though it's been pretty close to official for a few weeks. So I'm very excited to be here. For those of you I don't know, I come from Durango. I've been working out of Durango and across the Intermountain West and across Colorado with an organization called the National Young Farmers Coalition. So I've been really focused on next generation of agriculture, making sure young people have a place on the land, that we have water for agriculture. I've interfaced quite a bit over the years with CWCB and our roundtables. I have our Southwest Basin chair here today, so see Mike Preston quite a bit down in Four Corners area. So that's sort of been the focus of my work, really focusing on state and federal policy for future generations of agriculture, farmers and ranchers to get on the land. So glad to see some familiar faces here. I have just a brief update on sort of what I've been up to and what we have coming up at the department. Again, this is sort of the first few weeks I've been spending as much time as possible meeting with staff. We have almost 300 employees at the Department of Ag, so I've been doing my best to meet everyone over time, starting with, of course, our Broomfield hub. Been meeting with all kinds of stakeholders across the industry, really starting to plan out field visits, which is going to be my focus in the coming weeks and months ahead, but doing what I can from the office to meet folks and be sure folks know who I am and we have a chance to get acquainted. Same is true with the legislature, just getting my feet wet on everything that's going on downtown and doing my best to stay in Broomfield while downtown does what it does. So in terms of what we have with regards to policy, before I came on board, we had some items, irons in the fire down at the Capitol. We are working on 2 bills and 3 sunset reviews. So the first piece of legislation is a produce safety bill, and this is in response to the federal, the FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act. Essentially what this would do is enable the department the authority to oversee the implementation of FSMA, the food safety rule, rather than the federal government. So we're seeing that move forward. We also have a surface water quality monitoring program bill. This would give the department authority to create a surface water quality monitoring program. The new program would be modeled after our groundwater monitoring and would be used to determine if more regulation is needed through Department of Health and Public Health and the Environment. So this is another step for the Department of Ag to be able to sort of oversee surface water quality in lieu of the federal government. Our 3 sunset review bills
are regards to the Pet Care Facilities Act program, the Public Livestock Market Regulation, and the Seed Potato Act. We are moving forward on these. I'm happy to answer any questions as well as we go on. We also, in our budget request, added funding for marketing. Farmers are hurting, as I'm sure you all know, from the trade war. We are trying to do our best to continue beating the drum on market access for producers, both locally and abroad. So we're looking forward to more capacity and resources to keep doing that work. We also are looking to add a staff person on our biocontrols program. I was just out in Palisade on Friday visiting our insectary. We're doing amazing work on biocontrols and have some exciting developments on Russian thistle rust. So looking to really scale up that program. You might know we've been finalizing the construction of our lab facilities up in Broomfield. So it's been a many years process of consolidating the Department of Ag up in Broomfield. We held a ribbon cutting ceremony back in December for the new lab building. Construction is on target. And the lab will be moving from our current building in the Highlands near downtown up to Broomfield in March or April. So excited to bring the rest of our staff up, most of the rest of our staff up. We still have, of course, remote staff, but the lab crew up to Broomfield. And in this process, we also created a new division at the department, which is laboratory services. So sort of took the lab services that were sparsed out across divisions and created a new division in charge of that with our new division director who came on board January 14th. Stock show has been happening the last few weeks. We've had a heavy presence at Stock Show. Our brands division is ensuring that animals are leaving the grounds with their proper owner. Our animal health division, which is important. Our animal health division staff are assisting with the monitoring of animal health, biosecurity, and any animal tampering concerns. So they've been on site. Our markets division has hosted a number of international visitors, extending their experience out onto the farm as well and hosting farm tours, which has been quite fun. Commissioner's Office worked with CSU and commodity groups to provide the Ag Adventure educational exhibit on the 3rd floor. And then I also had the chance to speak at a reception awarding the Conservationist and Rancher of the Year awards at the rodeo. So that was a good time. January 1, we launched our Ag Workforce Development Program. This is our apprenticeship program that compensates ag businesses to bring on ag interns. So it's the first year that we're running this program. We have about 20 applications so far. We have a couple weeks left on the deadline, and we're really excited to be supporting next generation apprenticeships on ag businesses. State fair is moving ahead, getting ready for this year. We have a state fair audit, performance audit underway, so looking forward to the findings from that and then how we can continue improving the state fair, but very excited to be part of that. Somewhat lastly on my agenda today, Farm Bill, federal shutdown. Farm Bill was signed at the end of the year in 2018 and then followed by a government shutdown. So we've been tracking the impact of that on not only department, but on farmers and ranchers. We are excited about the legalization of industrial hemp. Colorado is at the forefront of that. We intend to continue to be so and are working with other states through the National Association of State Departments of Ag to understand how we coordinate with the federal government. It's been a little tough over the last 3 weeks to do such, but we're continuing to move forward there. We've also been reaching out to partners and stakeholders to understand the full impact on ag industry from the federal shutdown. One of the largest concerns has been the closure of the FSA offices. This is the time when operating loans are, farmers and ranchers are looking to acquire operating loans, and you need a signature from FSA to get that out the door. And there were 3 weeks when there was no one in the office to get those signed. So FSA offices opened temporarily before today. Now their offices are back open, but we'll continue to monitor the impact of the shutdown and any potential future shutdowns, depending how the next few weeks go. We'll also be pushing for grant renewals for the department and dealing with any of the personnel issues that have come from the shutdown. So that's the extent of my updates. Thank you all so much for my first meeting here today.
All right. Thanks, Director Greenberg. Appreciate you making it in on kind of a rough day to drive, but we appreciate you being here. So, and we just want to extend our welcome again for being here, and we're looking forward to working with you as part of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So, thanks. And I appreciate you watching those rustlers from the stock show, keeping those animals in their rightful owner's hands. So appreciate that as well. All right, we'll continue on with agenda item 10. Kevin looks like he's ready.
We are all ready. We had a bum disc, but we got a new one, so we're good. Good morning, or is it afternoon yet? I'm not sure. Okay, it's still morning. Great.
We're actually kind of on schedule.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's good. Then we'll keep you on schedule. So this is agenda item 10. It's the long title, but best practices for implementing water conservation and demand management through land use planning efforts, an addendum to the 2012 Municipal Water Efficiency Plan guidance document. So I'm going to give you a quick little background on this, but I want to steal too much thunder from our presenters here. We've got Ann Castle from the Getchis Wilkinson Center for Natural Resources Environment and the Natural Resources Energy and the Natural Environment, as well as Aaron Ruglin from the Babbitt Center for Land and Water Policy. So Ann and Aaron were the main authors on this. Went through a great process, worked with them over the last number of months. This was from a water plan grant fund, so which is excellent, good use of it. We're getting a nice product out of this, as well as engaging a lot of people across the state on this issue. And really the main impetus behind this was Senate Bill 15008. They'll talk a little bit about that during their presentation, but it was the Senate bill that basically said we want to integrate water land use planning into water efficiency plans and bring in water efficiency demand practices into land use planning. And part of this is, I'll just read a little thing, this is in the memo here, but to make recommendations regarding how to better integrate water demand management and conservation planning into land use planning, including as appropriate legislative, regulatory, and guidance or policy recommendations. So this fits right in that little wheelhouse there with creating guidance documents. We wanted to mirror the 2012 Water Efficiency Plan guidance document as much as we could, because this is fitting into water efficiency plans as well. And so went through the process, and I will turn it over to these guys to present on the whole thing. They've got a lot more detail. I don't want to give away too much for their show, so but it's been a great process so far, and I will turn it over to Ann Castle. Thanks.
All right, welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Good morning, board, and it's great to be here at the conclusion of what has really been about a year-long process.
If you would just state your name and who you're with, too.
I'm Ann Castle. I'm with the Getchis Wilkinson Center at the University of Colorado.
Thank you.
You bet. As Kevin mentioned, the reason we are here to talk about this guidance document is because of legislation that was passed in 2015. And as you all know, water providers, covered entities, which Director Mitchell said there are about 100 in Colorado, they're required to file water conservation plans. And in 2015, the statutory section that details what those water conservation plans have to contain was amended to include the requirement that water providers evaluate best management practices for implementing water conservation through land use efforts. So that's a big mouthful. And although the Water Conservation Board has had guidance in place since 2012 for how to go about filing these water conservation plans and what they should contain and sort of the process that you use to put one together, that guidance hadn't yet been updated to include this new component of how to integrate land use planning efforts into water conservation. So that's one of the things that this guidance, this draft guidance that you have in your materials is intended to do. But the other thing is that we're hopeful that it will advance the goal in the water plan that 75% of Coloradans will live in communities that have incorporated water saving actions into land use planning. So there's really a dual performance goal here. But in addition to the government requirements, it's also a good idea to figure out how to integrate water conservation and land use planning, because there are limits to what water providers could do in encouraging water conservation. They can use their rates, they can use their tap fees, they can educate, they can have landscape outdoor watering restrictions. But with all of that, the initial configuration of a development, a new development, has a huge influence in determining how much water that development is going to use. So if you can get in on the ground floor and talk about things like how density will impact overall water use, what sort of landscaping is appropriate for this new community, all of those things can influence the continuing demand, water demand of these developments. And you do that through land use planning efforts. So if communities can we get that? Maybe I shouldn't use this. So if planning departments and development departments and water suppliers can get together on the front end of development approval, then they can influence the overall amount of water demand and create better ability to absorb growth, to deal with resiliency and climate change. And that's what all of this is trying to do. So the team, as Kevin mentioned, that worked on this draft guidance document is the Babbitt Center for Land and Water Policy. And let me introduce my colleague, Erin Ruglin, who's from the Babbitt Center and who has been a wonderful colleague and an equal partner in this effort. Erin has done a tremendous amount of really excellent work that has gone into the document that you've got in front of you. And I'm with the Getches Wilkinson Center. An integral part of our team has also been Kevin Reedy, who's been part of the process every step of the way. And of course, you all have been part of it because of the grant that you gave to us to support this effort. And that was part of the water plan grant funding out of the water conservation and land use bucket. So we started out about a year ago with a literature review. There's a fair amount of articles, reports that have been written on this subject of integrating water and land use. But interestingly, most of the literature that exists is aimed at planners, people in planning departments and community development departments. There's very little that is aimed at water suppliers. And of course, that's what we want to do to help water suppliers be able to put these considerations into their water conservation plan. So another thing that we're hoping to do through this guidance document is to start to fill that void of literature that's aimed at water suppliers, not just planners. After we did a pretty extensive literature review, we did some interviews. We selected 10 Colorado water providers, and we looked for diversity geographically. We have both East Slope and West Slope. We looked for diversity in size. So we've got everybody in this interview process from the sort of smallest that are required to file water conservation plans that serve 2,000 acre feet of water per year, up to the largest provider in the state, Denver Water. We also look for diversity in land use authority. And here's what I mean by that. One of the very tricky things about integrating water conservation and land use is that they're very siloed organizations. So in Westminster, where we are, for example, the water utility and the planning department both report to the same city council. They're both in the same governmental structure, but they're in different buildings. And historically, although it's not true in Westminster, but historically those two groups of people haven't talked to each other very much. That's even more true for water suppliers that are not part of a municipal government. For water suppliers that are special districts, for example, and they'll serve areas like unincorporated county areas or part of a city, maybe the whole city. They'll serve developments, HOA type developments that aren't incorporated, and they don't have land use authority in their governmental structure over those developments. And so in those cases, it is not common for the water supply folks to even know who the planners are that they're dealing with. And so we wanted to make sure in this interview process that we got people of both varieties, those that were in an organizational or governmental structure that has land use authority and those that aren't. So 10 interviews, conducted those between April and June of last year. Many of the interviews that we had were not just with the water supply personnel, but also with planning department folks. And what we were trying to get from those interviews is, what are you doing now to integrate with your planning department? And how can we help you? What would be useful to you in terms of guidance that would help you fulfill this statutory requirement and also realize the benefits of integrating water and land use? So after the interviews were complete, we put together an advisory committee of really knowledgeable people in this area. Kevin helped us assemble that committee, 15 experts in the field. And that included representatives of organizations like the Municipal League, Special District Association, elected officials, consultants who help people put together water conservation plans. We had both Kevin and Ann Miller from the Department of Local Affairs, NGOs that have expertise in this issue. So we had a really good advisory committee. And what we did was, after the literature review, after the interviews, we put together just a basic, simple checklist of different practices that could be identified and evaluated by water providers to see what would work for them, what might fit with their particular situation. And one of the things that is challenging about this guidance is that we have such a huge spectrum of water providers in the state, in terms of size, in terms of geography, in terms of water supply capability, growth, all of those different things. And so there is no one-size-fits-all recommendation. What we were trying to do is put together a pretty comprehensive list of best practices so that people could cull from that list and figure out what would work best for them. So we started out with a checklist. We had that reviewed by the advisory committee. From that, we produced guidance, the first draft of guidance. We had that reviewed by the advisory committee. We got a second draft of the guidance. And then in October, we held a workshop. We held it in Summit County to be sort of geographically central. We had 40 participants in that workshop. And again, pretty broad spectrum of people who attended, including water providers, county planners, NGOs. We had a couple of journalists there who were interested in the process. And what we were trying to do was get their input on this second draft document and give us a reality test. Are we given practical advice? Is everything there that should be there? What's missing? Is it readable? Do you like the format? Just kind of basic reality test type issues. And we got a lot of good input. And after that, we got the workshop suggestions. We got additional written comments from people who are interested. And we produced a third draft. Then we had that finally reviewed by Kevin Reedy and produced the fourth draft, which is what you have in your materials today. So what we've got is, on the left, you see the existing guidance document that is on your website, tells people how to put together a water conservation plan. And that was done in 2012. What we've produced is on the right, and that is an addendum to that document that just deals with land use. So again, it's kind of a expanded list of best practices with some guidance to people about how to delve into that list and figure out what works best for them. In addition, when that guidance was produced in 2012, there was also a sample plan. So it was a plan that was written by the fictional city of Shallow Creek, and it is what a plan would really look like if you put one together and used the guidance document. So in addition to this draft addendum, we also put together a sample plan, addendum to the sample plan that has those land use components. So we've got that as well. So in terms of format, we mirrored the format of the 2012 guidance document. It uses the same organizational structure. It uses the same layout. We have more than 100 best practices listed. And again, there's no one size fits all. We've tried to give people a smorgasbord that they can pick and choose from. We've got hundreds of examples and case studies because the feedback that we got from the workshop was that it's really, really helpful for people to see, oh, this was what was done in the city of Monte Vista, so that we now can go to our board and say, hey, look, we'd like to try this practice. It's worked successfully in these other places in Colorado. Most of our examples and all of our case studies are from Colorado water providers. We've got some examples from other cities around the country as well. And this is intended to be an electronic document. It has hyperlinks to all of the base documents that we're referring to in the guidance. And Kevin and his team have committed to keeping up those hyperlinks and adding examples as needed. So it's intended to be a living document. So in terms of contents, just some basic divisions. The first one is using this document. The second is those actual best practices. And you'll see, you may recognize the categories there: foundational activities, technical assistance, ordinances and regulations, and education. Those are the divisions in the 2012 guidance, but they're also the categories from the 2010 SWASI levels framework. That was the recommendation from the 2010 SWASI about how to categorize and think about water conservation. So it uses those same organizational structures. And it also takes the worksheets from the 2012 guidance and updates them to include land use practices. So the same worksheet methodology can be used. So just as an example of what we're talking about, this is a sort of next level table of contents from the foundational activities section. And you can see that the very first thing is talk to each other. The water provider and the land use planning department need to talk to each other. They need to establish regular contact. And we've recommended that they set up a water and land use planning team so that there will be continuous contact and they can understand what each other's problems are and what the planning horizon looks like. So that's the sort of basic level at which we're starting, but the best management practices that are included in this document go well beyond that. So this is just an example page. I know you can't read this from where you are, but everything in the sort of brown, light brown shaded boxes, those are examples, again, with web links to the actual information. The green box on the right is case studies. In this case, there's studies about planned unit development, land use practices, and there's examples from the City of Westminster and Eagle River Water and Sanitation District in Eagle County. So this is a kind of busy page, but this gives you an idea of how much information is packed into this document. So next steps. Here we are. We've gone through 4 versions, gotten a lot of input. Now this guidance addendum is presented to you for consideration and approval. After that, obviously there'll be a posting of the guidance document on the website, but we need to have an informational campaign and try to help water suppliers understand how to take advantage of the information that's provided, how to implement some of these best practices. And so we're starting to talk, and Aaron can speak to this more, about informational educational campaign that will include webinars, probably co-partnered with CML and Special District Association, workshops. So those are the next steps that are intended. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have questions.
All right, thanks, Ann. Director George.
Very nice work. I'm very impressed with the way this has all turned out. And so to the two of you and those who've supported you and our staff, really beautiful work. Great. So thank you for doing this. This whole concept has been a long time coming, and perhaps you've found the right way out of this political morass we've been in. And that's to do best management work and do it beautifully. The one question that's been nagging at me, though, is when I looked at your list of participants, it wasn't obvious to me where the end user or the customer of water use was included, and all of those that eventually get a customer to a place where they are using water, whether they're a homeowner, a business, whatever. Can you help me where you included any observations or comments or needs from that whole market base that is part of the end result?
Good question, Director George, and thanks for your review of the document. We had in both our advisory committee and in the workshop, mostly water supplier and professional representatives, but we did have elected officials as well. For example, county commissioners, representative from Dr. Cog, representatives from Northwest Cog. We actually had in both of those venues, Ellen Roberts, who was the sponsor as a state senator of Senate Bill 8 that generated this requirement. So we didn't have, sort of direct consumer representation, but we did have representation from the elected officials who represent them. My thought was that the water suppliers themselves would be familiar with the needs and desires and either understanding or lack of understanding of their own constituents. But that might be a direction that we could take in the next step in the education process as well.
Thanks, Ann. Jackie.
I was just so happy to hear about this work being done. This is fantastic, and thanks CWCB for funding this. In a former life, I was a planner for the city county of Missoula, and the disconnect between growth and water needs, as you said, it's very siloed. And so I wish you well in these implementation stage of reaching out and making sure that this becomes a living document that gets used instead of sitting on the shelf after you've done all of this work.
Right.
So thank you.
Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Ann, for this presentation, and thank you, Kevin, for all your work on this. This is a wonderful document. I wish we had this 5 years ago when we were developing our conservation plan for the city of Steamboat Springs. I think there's a real issue here, and I'd like to hear more about the rollout of the informational campaign, the educational campaign. First, I think the real challenge is getting leadership involved, and I think you've done that in the early stage of this, of bringing county commissioners in, maybe presentation to city councils. But until you get the attention of the planning department, which is often the case, these two and water providers working together, that is the challenge. And this is a human and sort of a turf battle kind of thing, particularly if this water provider isn't part of the city apparatus. In Steamboat Springs, for example, it's a hybrid, City of Steamboat and Mount Werner Water, which is a Title 32 agency or district. Anyway, that's the challenge I see, and it's a human challenge, and I think your rollout really needs to define who you're going to be targeting. End user is very important in this, but if the end user realizes and recognizes that city development code and county subdivision regulations and zoning regulations speak to this, they will read that document and they will comply with it. But bringing the community along is very important. Those are the end users, and that gives them the political will and latitude, the leadership. Gives them the leadership, that political will to go ahead and move forward with this, to make sure that our conservation plans and our development comport with these excellent best management practices.
Great. I think that is such a good point, Director Gallagher. And one of the things we've recommended to get directly at that point is that the planning department and the county commissioners or the city council look at their comprehensive plan and include some sort of robust water element in it. If that happens, then that goes on the checklist that the planners in the planning department have to go through when they review any new development proposal, any rezoning proposal. And that's sort of that implementation train that you're talking about, but we need to get to the elected officials in order to make that happen. And so that's why one of the considerations for continuing education is partnering with CML, partnering with Special District Association to try to make that connection. Kevin, do you want to say more?
No, that really sums it up well. That's it, and it's always the elected officials we're trying to bring into this discussion as well, because if staff wants to do something, but the elected officials aren't on board, obviously it's going to, maybe not go anywhere or have some miscommunication. So it's always so important. And with all the other trainings we've been doing, we've been bringing elected officials into the room with staff to try to talk through this stuff and say, listen, this is what we want to do. So, and good news about this latest Steamboat plan that they're starting to work on now, the water efficiency plan. I've met with them a couple of times, and they are very on board with bringing all the land use department, the community development department in together, and running all this stuff by them already. So they've got that already working in the works. So that's good news. A bit better than 5-6 years ago. So
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Ann or Aaron or Kevin? I just want to say as was Director George and Director Gallagher, I was impressed. This was a concise document with a lot of information. When you put in the links of both the toolkits and the other reports and all that put together, it was easy to read and it was easy to move around in. So I just wanted to say, well done. And this is a good document.
That's good to hear. It's like brimming with information.
It is.
But we were trying to put it in a readable format. So it's good to have that feedback.
All right. So any other questions? Did Aaron, did you want to say anything? Are you good?
Hello, Erin Rugland, Babbitt Center for Land and Water Policy. I'll just say thank you to the board for your consideration and review of this document. It's been a long process, and I think it's turned out really well for us. And this document, as Ann alluded to, fills a gap for water providers and thinking about the land and water nexus, and also, wraps up in all of the other state activity in this area. So I think it'll be a really good addition to all the other resources out there.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Kevin?
Okay. I've got staff recommendation if you guys are ready for that.
We're ready.
And Erin came up from Arizona, so she's experiencing the snow. I don't know if she's used to this or not, but
just this morning?
I don't know. Yeah, this morning. So that was a commute, huh? So I've got staff recommendation. Staff recommends that the board adopt the best practices for implementing water conservation and demand management through land use planning efforts addendum. Long title.
Director Hawkins.
I'd move to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 10.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins, second by Director Gallagher, that we approve staff recommendation on agenda item 10. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you so
Kevin.
much.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Aaron, for all your work. We're still right on time, so we'll continue on with agenda item 11, water plan progress and integration with the statewide water supply initiative. We have Greg Johnson and Russ Sands, I believe.
Greg Johnson, CWCB staff. I think Kevin Reedy here and Ann Castle and others made my job that much easier by really summing up, one important way that we're really moving the water plan forward. And I would say we are doing anything but letting the water plan sit on the shelf. So everything we do as an agency, as Director Mitchell really summed up this morning during her director's report, is really moving the water plan forward. So today we wanted to give you an update on where things are headed, not only with the statewide water supply initiative, as you know that we are in the thick of right now, but how, more importantly, that integrates with the trifecta that we've discussed before. So the three main pieces being the basin plans, the statewide water supply initiative, and the water plan proper, and how we are really attacking all of that at once, rebranding things, deep into discussions as well with the new director. Director Mitchell has been meeting with Director Gibbs, with the new DNR director, so we are very excited to really bring him up to speed with all the good things that we're doing today. So I want to remind you, as you all know, that the water plan came out 3 years ago in November, so we just passed the third anniversary of the water plan. We do have the 2017 ripple effects report, which is still the best running summary that we have of all the progress we've been making on the water plan. Among other things, we are 65% of the way through progress on the items, the critical action items in the water plan. So that's 103 of the 159 critical actions in the water plan on which we are making progress. As you well know, we've got all the different sections here. So working through supply, agriculture, funding, conservation, as you just got a great update, land use as well, storage, education, watershed, and all the additional items that wrapped up in there. So we are well underway, and you'll hear more today on how things are progressing with other items as well. So again, a quick reminder from Chapter 11 of the water plan. Chapter 11 is the shortest chapter in the water plan. The folks who wrote it had the foresight to plan ahead and designate when these different planning initiatives would be initiated. So it did not commit to the completion date, understanding that these things take time, working with the roundtables, the major scientific effort that's going into the statewide water supply initiative, all the technical pieces of that. But we did, at the time, commit to initiating the Basin implementation plans in 2018, initiating the water plan update in 2020, and then again, the statewide water supply initiative in 2022. So I'm going to tag team with Russ Sands here today so he can help with anything that I've missed today. But we're going to go into a little bit more detail on how we see this really shaping up as we move forward, and what the most appropriate timeline might be for each of these different pieces. So another reminder for you with the analysis phase, so the statewide water supply initiative, this is a very, very different analysis than we have ever done before. So we are quantifying the 5 different planning scenarios that were encoded into the water plan. This was, a lot of work went in from this board as well as from the Interbasin Compact Committee and the Basin Roundtables. We are very much in the thick of this modeling right now as we speak. So we're in the technical weeds. We have a big meeting next week to go through some of the results on that. We also are working intensely with some folks on data visualization concepts, so how we can really serve up the data for you, what kind of web technology we can use. How we really make sense of the different stories. So stay tuned, more to follow there, and Russ will also go through our update processes for outreach with stakeholders. Is this on? There we go. So as you know, with the projects bill, we'll get an update later today from Kirk Russell, I believe. But we did include a request for $5.5 million for all things water plan. And so this is not just the statewide water supply initiative, not just the basin plans, but the real focus here is to make sure that all of this is integrated. I think it was Director George who had said that, the day you stop planning is the day that the water plan dies. You have to keep these things in motion. And so the grand plan here is to do just that and to secure funding to do so. So we're going through right now with the projects bill. We'll see what happens with the legislature, so we don't want to be presumptuous, of course. But we have a lot that we're really planning to use this funding for. So a big piece of that is for updating the basin plans. And we went back and looked at all the different numbers that we had from each of the different basins and basically averaged those out to hardwire into this funding request enough money to really get to the finish line with basin plan updates. We included other things like a proper projects database, so an online reporting database similar to the 1051 water conservation data reporting. So having a portal that we would have everything in one place and have very consistent data across each of the different basins. This was one of the shortfalls, if you will, from the planning last time around. There's a lot of good data that we have, but there's really a lot of holes too. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. So we've really factored that into this this funding request. We also have innovation and outreach funding, as well as the 1051 database improvements itself. So the 1051 database has been wonderful. We're about 4 or 5 years now into that reporting process. We have had some little pieces of funding to improve that database, but we're really trying to up the ante on that piece as well. So as you see there, we've got the ABC. We are really working with how we can figure out kind of the marketing and simplification of this water plan process. So we know it's not going to be as easy as ABC, but we really want to make sure that it's not just the water wonks that can make sense of what we're doing with the planning. So simplifying things to the analysis and planning phase. So that would be the statewide water supply initiative. The basin integration phase would be the basin planning phase, basin implementation plans. And then the comprehensive update phase would be the water plan proper. So really looking at those policies, how we get to what was chapter 10 in the water plan last time around. So all those critical actions, all those measurable outcomes, we'll really be focusing on those this time around. So we're working with all the section chiefs. This is an agency-wide effort, of course, and of course even interagency, interdepartmental, but starting to have those conversations about what some of those measurable objectives, critical actions might look like next time around. What made sense, what really worked last time, what maybe didn't, what data capacity do we have to really estimate these things, where can we collect better data? So we're starting those conversations now as well too. One other thing I would add about this funding request that has particularly strategic is that from a contracting standpoint, this is a much, much cleaner way to really facilitate this whole planning cycle. Last time around, we had different grant requests, and in many cases, multiple grant requests from different roundtables that were then going through our procurement process. And we had a lot of hiccups with that procurement process. And we've already been working with the contracting folks in natural resources to really have this discussion up front. Try to figure out how can we streamline contracting. We know the state has its fiscal rules. There always are a lot of different hoops to jump through. We get that. But as much as possible, we're really trying to streamline this so that the roundtables can work effectively, with a main general contractor as well as with their subcontractors to work on basin-specific issues.
Russ Sand, CWCB staff. So just building on what Greg said, I'll walk you through a little bit of the timeline of where we're headed. And the nice thing about that $5.5 million request, and again, thanks to the board for moving that forward. We're hopeful that that passes through the legislature. But it's really the vision for the next 3 to 4 years. So we're kind of seeing this as that trajectory of helping us to, basically from today of where we want to be in 2022. So if 2018 was really digging into SWASI analysis, and we're still in the heart of it in some ways right now, and then kicking off and staying true to the goals in the water plan in Chapter 11, as Greg had mentioned, of launching and initiating the Basin Implementation Plan updates. And we did that in a number of ways, really trying to work with roundtables. Greg and I personally went to all the roundtables in addition to our staff who were always there. And really tried to kind of explain where we're going with SWASI and really build this collaboration and stop thinking of SWASI as this discrete effort and really as something that can be built on, added to, changed, and worked with through the basin. So that's where we're at, and we're already in 2019 planning. We've got a pretty full plate this year, but one of the things that we realized pretty quickly into this process, and it was one of our survey questions that we had asked last year at Water Congress, was would folks find it valuable to have an implementation working group or some kind of forum to kind of really think through some of the recommendations of SWASI, get a bit of details, and think about how they would like to frame up the Basin Implementation Plan updates. And that came back pretty high percentage of people said yes, so we've put that in motion and now have a plan in place. Had our first kind of initial kickoff meeting last year, and actually on Wednesday, Water Congress in conjunction with PEPA will have our second meeting. So in addition to the working group, we're still tracking, keeping SWASI on track to launch and the actual plan come out in July. And then we have right after that to kind of really build into this integration in the next phases of getting SWASI off the ground and built into the Basin Implementation Plans, the statewide summit, which we're really excited about. We're going to do this in Winter Park, and I've got a slide on this in a minute. Then in 2020, we're kind of looking at, again, we really are seeing this need as, the hallmark in some ways of the basin plans are really the actual projects themselves and being able to better track those instead of them being these discrete spreadsheets that are not consistent in many ways, sometimes just missing titles, sometimes missing things like cost, which is understandable, and we're hopefully moving that forward by building in tools in the SWASI process that can allow us to allow basins to kind of give them the power to better figure out some of those project dollars if they don't have a contractor on staff, for example. But we're really working to kind of scope what that might look like now and think about kind of starting that effort in 2020 and initiating the water plan update itself, which hopefully tracks very well with this Basin Implementation Plan process of if you're updating the plans in many ways, you're updating the water plan itself. So that is the 5-year anniversary, and we're already kind of forecasting out to that what we might do. Looking even farther out, and again, these are, this is the vision of where we think go ahead, but, looking towards maybe completing the BIPs in 2021, maybe thinking about, we knew it took a lot of stakeholder engagement and iterative process of editing and kind of fine tuning the water plan. So if we're updating anything, we know we got to build in some time for that, and then maybe looking out to 2022. With some initiatives of education engagement around this, the finalization of that IPP database, and then potentially updating the water plan and having that ready in 2022. So that's the vision. Some specifics going back to where we're at now. This implementation working group, we are recording these sessions. We have them online. So Megan on our team has done an awesome job of just kind of integrating everything into our website and getting that cleaned up. So we have the progress that we're making on that along with all the dates. And any questions, and another piece of that are just these technical webinars. So some of the pieces that we're going to handle in the implementation working group are maybe a little bit higher level at times, more kind of on the policy side, or where do, generally yes, no, up, down vote. Are we headed in the right direction with some of the things we're thinking around the BIP updates and the statewide summit? Whereas these technical webinars really allow us the forum to dive into SWASI and some of the kind of the granularity that people are already asking us about, and quite frankly, we're still in the middle of analysis of, but these dates track with kind of our deadlines for SWASI and kind of keep us on track for the final launch in July. So these, again, you can sign up for. They're on the website. We've gone around to the basins. We're hoping people will sign up for these. And then again, the statewide summit I mentioned, we're going to have that in Winter Park. It's a beautiful facility. We're really excited about it. They're excited about it. It's a great local partnership, but really looking at this as the kind of launch of moving from SWASI into how do we get that integrated into plans, and whether it's, this is great, it works for me, or hey, these 5 scenarios, I'm not sure how to figure this out. We want to work through those details with the basins and find a way to make this even more useful and helpful. And hopefully that funding initiative passes and we'll be able to kind of move that forward and drive it. One other thought, and I'm sorry this is caught off, but as we're looking out to 2022, we realized, I don't know how many people remember the Water 2012 effort that WECO had done under their former name, and for the, I think at the time it was 75th anniversary of Colorado River District, our group, Northern Colorado. We're thinking maybe it makes sense to do like a kind of a revamp of that in 2022. So it'll be the 85th anniversary of CWCB and River District, but it'll also be the 100th anniversary of the Colorado Compact, the Colorado River Compact, and actually a few of our other compacts and decrees have some of anniversaries in there as well. But it'd be a new way to really re-engage existing stakeholders and kind of try to bring some new stakeholders from the public into the fold. So we're excited about this and continuing to explore that. So with that, I'll leave it to any questions you have.
All right, thanks, Greg and Russ. I appreciate it. Are there any questions for? Oh, Director Dutton.
Wanted to make a quick comment and thank you guys for all the thought that you've put into this. I think it's kind of heavy and kind of wonky content, but you've put a lot of effort into making it understandable and making the timelines understandable for people and really bringing it back around that everything we're doing is to implement Colorado's water plan. So thank you for that and for making it to where I think we can go out and share with people what's going on and it really makes sense. So thank you.
All right, Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Greg and Russ, for your presentation, and thank you for your effort to make it around to all the roundtables. At least I think you've made it around to most of them. Ours certainly a couple of weeks ago, and to get down where this rubber meets the road. These are the working groups you're going to be working with, and I think I can't overemphasize the necessity of ensuring that this somewhat abstract and wonky process has a concrete application at the ground level, and you can communicate that. And I think this webinar series will be take us a long way in getting there. I guess I would ask who you're targeting there, because the general roundtable, I think it's great, but we have to have the right working groups together, and we don't have a consultant on board to help sort of translate a lot of this for us. But how, webinars are great, but you're sort of throwing it out there, and we need to make sure that we have the right people involved and engaged with this process. So I think your visualization of data objective is a very important component of this to make this meaningful, so that people can make the commitment to this process of updating their basin plans next year. So that's just a comment, and I want you to keep that in your thinking.
Yeah. Thanks, Director Gallagher. I guess I would also add that as part of the webinar process, we're also soliciting feedback prior to each of those. So each of those dates that Russ had showed, we have what I think is a Google form that is linked from the water plan website. So all of this, as Russ had mentioned, Megan's been doing a wonderful job helping us get this stuff up on the website already. And for each of those webinars, we will have a Google form to solicit some of those questions in advance of the webinar, so we can really anticipate, what some of those big questions might be and where we can take that. And then, also as Russ had mentioned, we will have the recordings of those posted. So if folks cannot make it, at least we'll have that resource available for people. So it's just, one way to dive into this, but I know it'll be a long process to really get the information out there in the next 6 months plus.
I'll just add to it. So we are recording the technical webinars too. So we'll have those in perpetuity for anyone to reference. But part of the strategy in securing this funding, if it were to pass, is really to help do exactly what we're talking about. Is we realize, just as we're going through it, trying to document all these key decisions we're making, and to be able to package that up in a meaningful way, whether it's, just streamlining how we're recording the data outputs, but also somebody that can help explain that and walk it through when new contractors come on board. We're hoping that this provides a bit of that bridge funding to kind of better integrate with Roundtable so they have access to the same team that we do, or at least the same knowledge that we do.
Director Mitchell.
Thank you, Greg and Russ. I just want to make sure that I echo some sentiments that were made, but this was really the direction of the board to the staff, was to push beyond what we had done. And that as we look at the next version of the water plan, the next version of basin implementation plans, and then our technical foundation, that it's not just a redo of what we've done before, that we build one upon the other. And that is what, as we're looking towards the future, that is what we've done with this, or that is what we're trying to do with this. And so the stakeholder-driven methodology, that is greater than what we have done before, and really pulled in the people on the ground and said, what do you need to push your basin forward? As we look at the IPMP database, what's come out of Swazi, how can we get projects moving on the ground? That's that IPMP database, how costing information, things like that. That's going to be how we implement Colorado's water plan. So what you're seeing here is that pushing further based on the board's direction to move us. And I'm very optimistic about our process. It's going to be what we developed in the first version of Colorado's water plan: inclusive, outreach, stakeholder focused. That's how we're doing everything. We're at roundtables. We are at conservancy district meetings. We are trying to get things out on the internet, or the interweb, whatever those people call it. Twitter, Facebook, things like that, trying to broaden the tent of involvement. And the Water 2022 is an idea to do that. And so I just wanted to make sure that you heard how loudly and clearly that these folks within the agency are doing that. And they're while Greg and Russ are up here, it's every section. And that's how we're doing things differently, is that there are not silos within the sections. What they have done in Swazi thus far, and the plan for the future, is that it's not a finance section or an in-stream flow section. It is the CWCB along with other state agencies, hand in hand, along with the people of the state.
Director George.
Director Mitchell, a lot of really good points, and I want to add some underlining and red ink to that. It's hard to know what the right timeline going forward is. You gentlemen and your teams, and those who've gone before on CWCB staff have really built the foundation that absolutely has to occur before we can begin to have water or wet solutions in time. And so time's the hard part. The work's hard and it takes time. So you guys are constantly trying to get more done and pace the right future goals. But I think the last year or so changed my outlook on how much time we have. It's called a drought. Climate change. I don't care how you characterize it. It's there, and it really woke us up this last year. This notwithstanding, this is wonderful. This helps us feel better. But then all I do is go back and look at the numbers about how really empty our reservoirs are and how much the consumption has been when Mother Nature had simply changed her processes. So I think the time is shorter than any of us want it to be or can imagine it to be. And so what's happening here is that the vision of this organization over the last probably 2 decades or more to get where you stand here today was the only way we're going to protect ourselves in the near future. And so what's going to happen is you're going to keep building this foundation so that we can start working on the pieces. The rubber is now at the road, and everyone that goes out every day says, we need more water. Everybody. So it's no longer, I'll get some from you, because you're going to say, I can't. That's never really been the case before. Justice Hobbs warned us about this several years ago. And he said that all the rules have changed. This is about sharing and cooperating, not finding more sources. It is still about finding more. It has to be. So it's pretty clear that for us to be able to have more in the future, we're going to have to be investing in much more expensive and harder projects and processes. And so that's why you see this increasing talk around the community about where is the money coming from. We absolutely have to have help at legislature. We have to have an increasing share of general revenues and severance tax. But we probably need more because we don't have time to do less. And so everything that anybody's going to do about finding money will have to rely upon your work to be able to talk to the public and show why and how there needs to be more money invested in this part of our society and our culture and our infrastructure. So if you don't have an eye on pricing and prioritizing costs, let's do it, because that's the kind of questions that are going to be coming back to us here. And we're the lead state agency. We're the ones that have to be justified in our forecasts of what we need to build, where, and what it's going to cost. So if you haven't been working hard enough, get after it, because there's more to do.
Well said, Director George. Director Hawkins.
I wanted to share with the board that when you guys came to talk with the Southwest Basin Roundtable, there were some questions about why we would need to do a basin implementation plan update. And so I wanted to use that as a bit of a launching point to repeat some of what was just said and has been said before. But I know from working with our basin implementation plan that even though the work that was done on our IPP list was really good, and especially for how far spread our geography is in the Southwest, and it's already stale. I can take a look at that list and say some of these projects have been done, some of these sponsors have changed, and I also know from working with that IPP list that there isn't a lot of good information that you could then use to justify the financial need that we would have to actually implement projects in the Southwest. And so I think some of this is going to be education and working with some of the roundtables and the consultants to really get the message about how this is all going to roll up. But don't worry about that kind of feedback too much, because you're going to hear direction from the state level that we need better, more refined information. We need good projects, and we need to have some prioritization, because we have a lot of need coming in for a small amount of money at the state level. And we need the work that you're doing, and we need the roundtables to do their end of that work so that we really have the right geographic spread of projects and that we're solving these problems. So not to say that I didn't hear the feedback, I'm just giving you my perspective from the state level, which is we need that information to do the assessment that we have to do at the board level to make the hard decisions about funding. And that this is also going to be useful for efforts that were discussed at the IBCC meeting in October about how are we possibly going to fund the remaining portion of the plan.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. Director Wells.
Yeah, I have a few random thoughts. And it's very interesting, you know, what we have done in the state water plan. I think we always struggle with how to let people know what we've done. And that was the genesis of my comment earlier about watershed restoration in response to wildfires and natural disasters. And sort of apropos of Commissioner George's comments, the public, the general public, is very concerned, I think, about natural disasters. They're coming faster and they're more severe. Extreme precipitation events is what they're called. And So I think we probably have an opportunity to engage the general public in ways that maybe we haven't been able to before. When we were first doing the plan and the Basin Roundtables were first doing their BIPs, it was the first. So we had to think of everything and we had to put everything down. Now we can focus more on really what are the biggest challenges? What are the biggest problems we're going to have? And where do we need that public support? We in water, we're inside baseball like all the time, and it's hard to get out. But there is a common concern that we're trying to address generally that we can probably communicate about in a different way than we have been able to in the past. And we had to communicate about everything. And now we can kind of say, okay, what are the big ones? What's going to make Colorado better and safer and more resilient? And I think that's a way to focus the message. And I gather that there's going to be a statewide education action plan. And so that may be the place to kind of focus some of these thoughts. And thank you for all your work.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Director Wales. If I might just clarify too, the statewide water education action plan is well underway as well. That is an effort of the Water Education Colorado organization. So they are basically consulting with us to really implement that very clear objective in the water plan. And they have some other folks they brought on board that focusing on kind of the strategic planning aspect of that as well. So that kicked off in December. We had a meeting about that, I believe, last week. And so that's a great point. So that's well underway. Hopefully that will really help inform a lot of the direction moving forward. But I also want to be clear that in no way is meant to supersede any of the awesome local work that's occurring either at the roundtables or other organizations that are out there. So there's a bunch of folks throughout the state, of course, that are involved in that process. So we're excited to see where that goes. I would also add, I think that's a wonderful point. We couldn't agree more that we can, probably do a better job messaging this. This has been an ongoing effort to really get the message out there. And we're excited too, especially with what Director Mitchell had said earlier about the COO position. So having Anna Moss on board, really helping with kind of that agency-wide coordination, as well as in the near future, hopefully replacing Mara McKillop, who was wonderful and unfortunately left us and moved to the Western Slope in Grand Junction, but to really get that communications spot filled that would really help with some of these outreach efforts as well. So stay tuned on that front.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Russ. I just want to say, this is really important. And I wanted to remind everybody that when Governor Hickenlooper made the executive order to have a water plan, it wasn't a top-down, it was an executive order, but it was for the people of Colorado to come up with a water plan. And that's what it was. And so we all feel part of it and we all feel bought into it, whether it was through the roundtable or the general public, and you gave us that opportunity. And here again, I see that happening. And I just want to thank you for involving the roundtables and the general public as much as you can, as hard as it is, to continue down this process of the updates. And so I just want to thank you for your work and ask you to continue in your endeavor. So thank you very much. All right. Do we have any other questions? So, all right. Well, we have our lunch break scheduled for 12:35. It is 12:33. So we're doing well. So we'll take an hour for lunch and reconvene at 1:35. I just wanted to mention again that the lunch is for the staff and the board. If you want to wait around till we're all done, and there's probably will be something left, there usually is, you can do that. The other thing is the round tables back there are for our lunch. So if you're sitting in the back at a round table, you don't get to have lunch with us, and we're going to take your spot. So sorry about that. But anyway, these tables up here are pretty small, so we're going to eat back on those round tables. So if you have anything back there, if we just ask that you would move it. So we'll reconvene at 1:35. Thank you.